Exodus, return to the promised land, lesson 14. We're talking about the Red Sea last week, or was it last week? Or I lose track. Oh, before we get started with this, next Wednesday we won't be having, because it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so we won't have Bible study, because 2 years we came out here and one Wednesday it was Diana and myself and Lula. And another time it was Diana, myself, and Laurel Shepherd. So we decided to quit having them the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So we won't have it next week. And then the next week is what? Auxiliary. And next week is Christmas. So we won't be having a Wednesday night study for a little while. Just stay tuned. So let's get now. Exodus, return to the promised land, lesson 14, the Red Sea. We were talking about last week about them escaping from the land of Egypt, how Pharaoh had finally agreed to let them go after he lost his firstborn, and in fact they ran them out pretty much. And so I wanted to start us back with Exodus 13:1. Tonight it says, the Lord spoke to Moses, consecrate every firstborn male to me, the firstborn from every womb among the Israelites, both man and domestic animal, it is mine. This is before the Levites became the chosen ones, the chosen tribe that was to be scattered amongst all the tribes, and they were the ones in charge of the temple and the tabernacle out in the wilderness and so on. Up until then, it was the firstborn, and there's a point we'll come to where you will see why it became the Levites after a while. So this is talking about consecrating the firstborn. Verse 3, then Moses said to the people, remember this day when you came out of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. For the Lord brought you out of here by the strength of his hand. Nothing leavened may be eaten. Today in the month of Abib, you are going out. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which he swore to your ancestors, that he would give you a land flowing with milk and honey. You must carry out this ceremony in this month. So this is the ceremony that they're carrying out every year at this particular time, and it's so that they'll remember what had happened to them, and they still forgot. If you read through First and Second Kings, First, Second Chronicles, and you'll see that they forgot anyway, but they're not supposed to. And the commemoration is supposed to help them by having these feasts and these celebrations, is to help them remember what God had done for them. We have to be careful for that in celebrating Christmas and Easter and things like that. Sometimes it will just become a holiday when it's more than just a holiday. And it said in there, Abib or Aviv, depending on which, Abib is the way you pronounce it, instead of Nisan. And I have a Jewish rabbi here that says, after we were delivered from, this is answering the question of why you use Nisan instead of Abib. After we were delivered from the Babylonian captivity, however, we started using the names that we became used to using in Babylon. And now these names serve to remind us that God, and notice it was a rabbi that wrote this, so he wouldn't spell G-O-D, that God has redeemed us from this second exile. So in Babylon is when they went to the Babylonian version of the months of the year is what we have now. And if you look up the Jewish months of the year, you won't see you won't see Aviv in there anywhere. You won't see the different ones that are named. In fact, there's only like 3 or 4 named in the Old Testament, so far as I know. And they're basically saying that they referred to this as the 4th month, this is the 5th month, this is the 6th. Rather than having a name, it would just say this is the 8th month. This would be the 11th month. It's almost over, almost the end of the 11th month. And you remember we were talking about it last time on the Jewish calendar, because the way their months is the lunar calendar, and so every so many years they'll add an extra month. So there'll be the last month, which I think is Adar, if I remember right. Then you have Adar 2 for a leap. They had a leap month instead of having a leap year, and But the reason you don't see that name anymore after this is because the Babylonian names is what they picked up. For 7 days you must eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there is to be a festival to the Lord. Why did they eat unleavened bread? They didn't have time for the bread to rise, so they ate unleavened bread, and so it reminded them each year as they ate unleavened bread. It says, unleavened bread is to be eaten for those 7 days. This may mean something, may not. It says at the beginning of what they began to call Passover after a while, instead of two separate feasts of Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it referred to it as Passover. And today the Jews, most all of them referred to it as the week of Passover. But in Passover you had a Sabbath, if you will. On the first, as it began, you had a Sabbath when it ended. It was always started on the 14th, the evening of the 14th of Nisan, and went for a week. So some people say it was 8 days. You had 1 day that was the Passover, and the next 7 days were the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So it depends on who you're reading, which Jewish rabbi you're reading after, or so on. But anyway, this is off the subject. But when it comes around to Easter time, and you're saying, and you see when they're talking about it, they said they had to take him down because the next day was the Sabbath. So they figure Easter from that and figure this was the Sabbath. So this must have been Friday, so we call it Good Friday. Let me confuse you a little bit. That was during Passover. So you had a Sabbath, which was the seventh day, was their Sabbath. The first day of the feast was a Sabbath, and the last day of their feast was a Sabbath. So which Sabbath were they talking about when they said they had the next day was the Sabbath? So that's just to give you something to stir your brain up a little. Unleavened bread is to be eaten for those 7 days. Nothing leavened may be found among you, and no yeast may be found among you in all your territory. On that day explain to your son, this is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. This is what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Let it serve as a sign for you on your hand, as a reminder, and on your forehead. Okay, so we know that the habit of the Jews to this day, they use, and in fact in the New Testament you'll see it called phylacteries. That's the Greek name of what it was. And it's a little box, a little leather box that they'll have a strap and they'll put on their hand and a strap around their head, and it has scripture in it in those, and it's called phylacteries, and they get it from this, but it doesn't say to tie these things around there. It says on your hand as a reminder, on your forehead. Why the hand and the forehead? This is an opinion question, and I'll give you mine in a minute. But why do you think it say the hand? It says, let it serve as a sign for you on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead. Okay, so you can see it and somebody else can see it on you. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. What do you say when you say, that was right at the front of my mind? Yeah. Something you're thinking about. Okay, to me, and this is not just, I've given it more thought than this over the years and read different people's writings. Your hand is what you do. Your mind is what you think. So in other words, let this be in what you do and in what you think, in both. So it means more than just, because this really sounds, think about it, if you just read it logically, it says, let it serve as a sign for you on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead. Well, that didn't mean they had to write it on their forehead. That's like when in the book of Revelation, when it says that the number shall be on their foreheads. Is there really going to be a number on your forehead, or is it because that's what's on the front of your mind at that particular time? Don't know. It never tells us. So this could have that meaning. So that the Lord's instructions may be in your mouth. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with a strong hand. Keep this statute at its appointed time from year to year. So this is to remind you from year to year. Why do we celebrate Christmas? To remind us. And that's what it's supposed to do. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. 11th verse. When, this word says when. It says when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites. He didn't say if you make it to the land of the Canaanites. He didn't say maybe you'll make it to the land of the Canaanites. If you stick with me, you'll make it to the land of the Canaanites. He says when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your ancestors, and gives it to you, you are to present to the Lord every firstborn male of the womb. All firstborn offspring of the livestock you own that are males will be the Lord's. You must redeem every firstborn of a donkey with a flock animal. But if you do not redeem it, break its neck. However, you must redeem every firstborn among your sons. So in other words, you would do for your firstborn son, you would do an animal sacrifice for your firstborn son. So you wouldn't kill your firstborn son as an offering. And a donkey is an unclean animal, so you wouldn't sacrifice a donkey. So you substitute an animal that you could sacrifice in place of the donkey. But the firstborn belonged to God. And this is supposed to be a reminder also. In the future, when your son asks you, what does this mean? Say to him, by the strength of his hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. So when your son asks you, you can tell him, this is the reason we're doing this. We're doing this for this reason, for this purpose. Verse 19. Moses took the bones of Joseph. Listen to this. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear a solemn oath, saying, God will certainly come to your aid. Then you must take my bones with you from this place. What kind of faith did Joseph have that he said, you take when you go back to the promised land? Not if. He says, when you take my bones. How many years was that? 430 years. It depends on how you figure it. Some people figure it different ways, but it says 430 years. 430 years his bones were in an ossuary, probably. In the Ten Commandments, it shows his body preserved like a mummy. That is one of those movies, but we don't know that. Probably it was an ossuary because they were Jews, but who knows? We don't know. But we do know that he had enough faith that God was going to bring them back to the promised land. He said, you take my bones with you. That's pretty serious, isn't it? When I'm gone from here, I don't care what you do with my bones. I don't care where you put them. I don't care where you put my body. It doesn't matter to me because I won't care. Will you? Well, about my body, maybe. Pardon me? No, I'm not going to be thinking about it. Probably won't care. So now I'm going to go through a couple of maps. You all love maps, don't you? Well, when you see the maps, to me, help me see what I'm trying to visualize because it's a picture. And this has to do with the Red Sea because they're going to be crossing the Red Sea. Okay? So you see the Red Sea comes out from, it says the Arabian Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean, and goes through here and then enters the Red Sea. And then you have two, it forks off in two. One is the Gulf of Suez, and the other one was the Gulf of Aqaba. And so you have those two branches that come off of there. Where did they cross the Red Sea? What place did they cross? You don't have to answer that question. Just hang on. Well, we'll see, because believe it or not everybody agrees. Archaeologists or Christians so I'm going to give you a couple of possibilities. This is the reason I put this up here because this is a satellite image of the same thing you just saw, and so you can see the two branches there. Well, the one on the left is the one where the Suez Canal is dug through into that. And I want you to notice something else. You notice how this is all a tan color. Up there it's green, and then it runs down here, it's green. Why is that? That's the Nile River, and that's the Nile Delta region at the end of it. And Goshen is up there about it's around where the Nile empties into the Mediterranean Sea. So, but remember, the Suez Canal was not dug there at this time. There was nothing to connect it over to the Mediterranean Sea. Is there a reason for that? I'll tell you in a minute. And I just put this one up here so you can see that the Suez Canal was dug through there, and they didn't just dig it right straight through. Like you can see, here's a lake here. It went through different bodies of water. They did it. They went further than they needed to, so they could use different bodies of water. The Panama Canal has a series of locks, and so it raises it because it has to go up over it. The Suez Canal is not that way. It's flat. So you're out in a desert region, so it's flat and you can just sail right straight through it. But that was not there. This was the land. This was dirt. Now here's the Gulf of Aqaba, the other branch there, and you can see it's open. Here's Israel. Over here is where they were. What's the best way for them to get to the Promised Land? Well, you wouldn't need a boat if you just went straight from here to here. It's all dry land. It's all dry land. Okay? I want to put something into perspective here. I want to look at modern day Israel, and for just a second, I've got a map here. And the reason I have this particular one is because you see, when you see a map of Israel, this is what they call the occupied West Bank. This is what some people say is Palestinian territory. This part that's out down here is Gaza, the Gaza Strip. And so this was what is Israel. This red here, if you see it, it's arid desert. It's hot. That's all desert. Okay, this nation. So think about this for just a minute. And this is desert, but this is cold more so than this, than like this. This is hotter. And this is the steppe. Steppe is like grasslands, no trees or anything. It's just there's not much there. And so the only fertile area that you can plant anything or grow anything is up here in this small part of Israel. If Israel did not occupy this territory here, look how much room. There's only like 50 miles from there to the Mediterranean Sea. That's hard to defend. So keep that in mind, that there's not much of area there. Now look at Israel in relation to, there's Israel way over there, and look at all these other countries around it. Here's Saudi Arabia. There's Egypt over here on the other side. Sinai Peninsula there, which is part of Egypt now. Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Iran. And look how small Israel is compared to all of them. And every other one of those countries are Islamic countries. And you have Israel. And they don't want Israel to have that. We have college students on campuses chanting from the river to the sea. Palestine must be free. They want to do away with that little chunk of land that Israel has. So let's put into perspective, this is Israel in relation to the United States. In other words, North Carolina is bigger. Well, I've got a population here. Israel's population in 2025, this year, 10 million people. North Carolina's population, 11 million people. We're the 9th or 10th most populous state in the Union now. But it's 10 million people is all there is in this nation of Israel. 11 million people here. There's 340 million people in the United States. And there's only 10 million people in Israel. That little piece, this is where these people were going. I want you to put it in perspective. They were leaving Egypt to come all the way over here to go into the Promised Land, this small area. Now, it's bigger than when they got there. They claimed more of the area, and there's more of the area promised to Abraham than what they ever claimed. But we're not going to get into that yet. So we'll go to the 14th chapter of Exodus, verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. You must camp in front of Baal Zephon, facing it by the sea. So let's look at a map of that. This is what he's talking. This is the Red Sea. This is the Suez. This is over in Aqaba, and this is where Baal Zephon is, and this is where they were supposed to camp, according to the Scripture. Okay? Why were they to camp there? Why would God lead them over and carry them into the end of the Sinai Peninsula, where they had their back against the wall, if you will? They were up against the Red Sea, and they knew that Pharaoh and his armies were following after them. Here is a map. This is the one I just showed you. If you started where the Israelis were in the land of Goshen, and you followed all the way down here, Sinai Peninsula, and up here is where they would have camped. And then you cross, so that would put them crossing the Red Sea right here. Okay? I think this one's closer right than the next one I show you, but the next one's more popular. Okay? And this, if this is the case, then Mount Sinai is over in where Saudi Arabia is now. The next map I show you will be over here. It'll show that it's over here. But I think this is the one that's more accurate. And if this is true, then this is where they crossed the Red Sea. It was a branch of the Red Sea, which was the Gulf of Aqaba, is where they crossed, if you follow this one. If it's this one, like many people believe, they came all the way down here and back up here, Mount Sinai would be down here in the Sinai Peninsula, and they would have crossed the Red Sea back over here, which is just before you get to where the Suez Canal is today, is where they would have crossed. Where did they cross? That was a long time ago. Let me put it this way. They crossed the Red Sea. But I thought if you saw the pictures, it'd help. I like seeing pictures. And you can see the Delta region, the way it's drawn there, that green area that was over on the other map. You have the river going there, and then all the Delta area going out to the Mediterranean. So, go back to the 13th chapter of Exodus for a minute, verse 17. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them along the road to the land of the Philistines. So he's telling you why he didn't go. They could have left here, gone straight across here, and been in the land of Israel in no time. But who was between them and there? The Philistines. What had these people been for 400 years? Or up to 400 years? Slaves. Were they soldiers? Were they warriors? If God had brought them, and what he's telling you here, if he'd brought them through there, he said, road to the land of the Philistines, even though it is nearby, for God said the people will change their minds and return to Egypt if they face war. So God, you know God thinks things out. You wouldn't believe that by some people. But there was a reason why he took them the way he did. He took them down and around. Did he have to take them that far? No, you wouldn't think so, but he carried them all the way down and he brought them up. He put their back at the Red Sea, and I think there was a reason. Exodus 14:3. Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, they are wandering around the land in confusion because they went down and then they turned back. He's thinking they don't know what they're doing, don't know where they're going, they're lost. He says the wilderness has boxed them in. So they were boxed in. Especially if this goes by where I thought they were. He carried them all the way down to the tip of the Sinai Peninsula. They were boxed in. And so Pharaoh's thinking, then verse 4 says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them. Then I will receive glory by means of Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. So I have a quote here. When God inflicts, this is from a Jewish rabbi, I couldn't remember which one. When God inflicts or exacts just revenge, which is just another term for punishment, on evildoers such as Pharaoh, his name is glorified. In other words, God gains glory by rewarding good and punishing evil. So God wasn't just delivering the Israelites. He was inflicting justice, if you will, upon the situation. They had these people, his people, enslaved for years. And so here was God proving his power and authority by what he did. Not just by what he told them, but what he did. I said, who can deliver true justice? That's answered itself. What's the number one, I didn't put this, the number one question that people ask that doubt that God is real, they say, if God is a just God, why do bad things happen to good people? Why does that happen the way it does? The answer is, there's injustice in this world because this is a fallen world. Is that not true? It's a fallen world. So if it's a fallen world, then there's going to be bad things happen, and there's justice in this world, and there's punishment in this world, and this world punishes us sometimes. If you don't believe there's punishment on all different kind of levels, get out there and drive down the highway any speed you want to. If you want to drive 100, you drive 100. And do it every day. Sooner or later, somebody's going to stop you. They're going to be saying, this ticket is justice for what you just did, and it's going to cost you, and you drive fast enough, it's going to cost your license. If more people could see that God can deliver and punish, thus administering justice, would more people believe in him? If they could see that this is just. So, and we understand it as Christians that this is the reason Jesus came to this earth, because there has to be justice, but there's another side. What's the other side of God besides justice? Mercy. Without mercy, we don't want justice. I don't want what I deserve. I don't want what I deserve. And I put, would it be just if God was only a God of mercy? Here's another quote. Justice is indeed God's glory, thus the centrality of abolishing evil, punishing those who commit it, and of course doing good in the Torah. So this is an example of it. This is him saying, this is a just thing, and it's this world requires. How many times you hear people say, there's no justice in this world? If there was justice in this world, this would happen. And we're always asking for, they deserve what they got. And you use terms like that because there is, when people do things like shoot somebody, like the one that tried to shoot Donald Trump and wound up killing a man out there, we were talking about it this evening, in fact, not only he wounded Donald Trump, but he was firing into a crowd. He had to have known somebody else could die besides the one I'm trying to kill. Does that person deserve justice? Well, he got his pretty quick because they killed him. This other one, that Charlie Kirk, if he's actually the one that did, they say alleged, but if he did, then he deserves justice. He deserves mercy in God's book, but he deserves justice. What is it that bothers so many people about the concept that God is just? If God was only just and not merciful, would that be a problem? Yes, it would be. It would be a big problem, especially for us. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. How many plagues did they go through? 10. Shouldn't it have dawned on them by now? But yet they didn't. They took off after them again. After all this happening, they're going to go after them again. Verse 5, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about the people and said, "What have we done? We have released Israel from serving us." So he got his chariot ready and took his troops with him. He took 600 of the best chariots and all the rest of the chariots of Egypt with officers in each one. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites who were going out defiantly. If you look at that, this is a Jewish guy that commented on this from what the actual Hebrew says. You'll see these three translations here. He got his chariot ready. You see one, so Pharaoh harnessed his chariots, so he prepared his chariots. In the Hebrew, according to this, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, that he's saying that he was in such a hurry to take off after these people that he hitched up his own ride and got in his chariot. He did it himself. Could that be true? I don't know, but he was ready to go. The Egyptians, all of Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his horsemen and his army, chased after them and caught up with them as they camped by the seaside, or beside the sea, beside, I love these names, Pi-hahiroth, in front of Baal-zephon. So this is where he runs up on them. What's something we haven't read about yet? What led the children of Israel? What were they following? There was a cloud during the day and a fire during the night, and they were following this. That's what was leading them. That's where they knew which way to go. Which one of them, after being in their families have been 400 years in Egypt, would know how to get to Canaan? I guess they could stop at a gas station and got a map. If it was a man leading them, so they were not going to look at the map. That's a good point. We don't look at maps until we're totally lost. Then we'll get the maps out. Yeah. Don't ask Diana about this. She'll tell you more than I want her to tell you. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians coming after them. All of a sudden, they were out here, they were being led, and they were tickled pink to get out of Egypt. Now, all of a sudden, they see them behind them. The Israelites were terrified and cried out to the Lord for help. They said to Moses, I love this. I love this. This is the first time this comes up. They said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us? What have you done? Talking to Moses, what have you done to us? Bringing us out of Egypt. Ibn Ezra says this, Jewish rabbi, God arranged for that whole generation of males to die in the wilderness, for they would not have the gumption to fight the Canaanites, to be replaced by a generation that had not known exile and slavery. Is that the reason? Is that the reason he had them to die out, that generation die out? There's a missing part of the story, because when they got the promised land the first time, they sent spies over into the promised land, and we'll read about that. But they sent spies over into the promised land. They came back and they said, "It's indeed a land flowing with milk and honey, but there's giants in that land, and we can't take that land." And remember, Joshua and Caleb said, we most certainly can take that land. What do you say we can't take that land? Because we can't take it, but God can. So they wound up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And yes, that generation died out before they could go in and take the land. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians coming up after them. The Israelites were terrified and cried out to the Lord for help. And how many plagues were there again? There were 10 plagues. Should the Egyptians have gotten who else should have gotten the Israelites? Shouldn't they have picked up on it by now that God's here to take care of us? He can do this. He can do all these plagues. He can create all this havoc. He can get us out of this land. He's got a cloud up here and a fire that leads us down here. And we have all this stuff, but yet we don't have enough confidence that He can deliver us from this. That sounds like us, doesn't it? What have you done for us lately? What have you done for us lately? Well, they're coming up. That army is coming up behind us. Yes, that's the same army that the firstborn out of every last one of their families just died. That's the same ones. Look up at the sky. And I think it's in the scripture. Isn't this, I love this. Isn't this what we told you in Egypt? Leave us alone so that we may serve the Egyptians. Is that what they told Moses? Do you remember reading that anywhere? They told Moses, said, look, leave us alone. We don't want to get out of here. We're happy being slaves here in Egypt. We just like it here. Is that what it is? But he said, isn't this what we told you? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. That's not the story. That's not the song they were singing when they were in Egypt and they were being delivered. They didn't say that. That changed. But Moses said to the people, don't be afraid, stand firm and see the Lord's salvation, so that he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you must be quiet. What happened? And like I said, we might read this in just a minute in the scripture I have here. I don't remember for sure. But the cloud and the fire that were leading them in the day, what happened to that cloud, that fire that was leading them during the day? What happened with it when they got to the Red Sea and the Egyptian army came up behind them? It moved around behind them and stood between. It stopped the Egyptians from. If you were the Egyptians and you see there's fire shooting out of the sky here during the night and a big cloud during the day, and we can't see the Israelites that we're chasing, maybe, just maybe, we should go home. Maybe. But Moses said to the people, don't be afraid, stand firm and see the Lord's salvation that he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you must be quiet. In other words, shut your mouth. That's what he said, shut your mouth. The Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to break camp. Who was going to deliver the Israelites here? God was. Did he just tell them just sit here and don't do anything? He told them to break camp, get ready, get prepared. I'm doing something. So we believe things by faith, but we still have to act on that in order. I've known people before that said, I was sitting in my house and I needed money, and I was sitting there and praying that God would have money put a check in the mailbox. I've had people to tell me this. And they go out and check the mailbox every day. Guess what? There was no check there. What were they doing during the time waiting for a check? Sitting doing nothing. And that's what was going on here. Pardon me? Waiting for something, for somebody to do something. But you have to do things. This is not in the Bible. God helps those that help themselves. People think that's the scripture, but it's not, but it's a lot of truth in the saying. As for you, lift up your staff, stretch out your... In other words, so he's giving Moses something to do. Couldn't he open the Red Sea without him doing this? Couldn't God have just struck down all of the Pharaoh's army before they ever got there? Couldn't he? Why didn't he? What's your opinion? He's showing Moses and showing the children of Israel. He's showing them, I want you to do something. Moses, I want you to do something, and I will deliver you, but you have to do something. And you can, so they understood. Stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry land. As for me, now can you think of that? Go down here, New River, the closest river here. Can you imagine New River opening up and you walking across on dry land? I want to tell you something. If I walked down a New River and I was standing there and it opened up, I would not walk through. I would not walk through. I'd say that thing might close up before I get a... That'd be a tough thing to do, but anyway. Israelites can go through the sea on dry land. As for me, I am going to harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will receive glory by means of Pharaoh, all his army and his chariots and his horsemen. So there's a reason for this, is the Israelites are going to... There's another reason to me that God led them to... Because he could have led them through on dry land north of the Red Sea, and then let them down this way, and so they wouldn't have had to cross water at all. But he didn't. And I think the reason why, personally, is because he opened up the Red Sea, he delivered them through, and he closed it up behind them, so they were burning their bridges with the past. No, we don't have the option of going back because the water's there.
They also took out the Pharaoh that wouldn't listen and kept burning
He
his
t-
army, and that whole bunch of these armies. So somebody
Yep.
back home had to say, we got to start over.
They say, where's our army that just went off chasing after these Israelites? Where are they? The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I receive glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the angel of God, who was going in front of the Israelites' forces, moved and went behind them. The pillar of cloud moved from the front of them and stood behind them. It came between the Egyptian and the Israelite forces. There was cloud and darkness. It lit up the night, and neither group came near the other all night long. He left them there all night long while he opened up the sea and blew the wind through it. He said, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back with a powerful east wind all that night and turned the sea into dry land. So the waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall to them on their right and on their left, on both sides. Now, if it's a river that's flowing and you stop it here, it's going to dry up on this side. But it's like the Red Sea, there's standing water on both sides. So opening it up, you can see how there'd be water standing on both sides. If you opened up New River, then this other side would keep right on going to get out of the ocean, and it'd be dry ground all the way across. But the Red Sea, this is the way I picture things. Not that I have to have pictures. And we answered this question already. 23rd verse. The Egyptians set out and pursued all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen, and went into the sea after them, which was not very smart. Like I said, I'd have been hard-pressed to go, period, even if God told me to go. But here was the Pharaoh. He sees them going across, and so he makes this intelligent, tactical decision. We're going to follow them. We're going through this. There's water standing on both sides. We're going to follow them. Good move. During the morning watch, the Lord looked down at the Egyptian forces from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw the Egyptian forces into confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve, and some translations say for them to come off, wheels to swerve, and made them drive with difficulty. I guess go. Let's get away from Israel, the Egyptians said, because the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. It's about time that it dawned on you. What were you thinking? This is, I put this in here because would you have followed this? And why would Pharaoh have followed them after that? He was angry. He was angry. So I'm going to read you part of the most entertaining story and the funniest story in the Bible to me to show you what anger does to you. It has to do with Balaam. In Numbers 22:27. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she crouched down under Balaam. So he became furious and beat the donkey with his stick. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth. Okay? And he asked Balaam, what have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times? If you were riding a donkey or a horse and that donkey or that horse turned around and said something to you, what would you do? I say, what? But what? Balaam is so ticked off, what does he do? Balaam answered the donkey. Balaam answers the donkey. This is like Pharaoh. He's so angry that he doesn't think logically until it's too late. Balaam answered the donkey. You made me look like a fool. You made me look like a fool. I'm talking to a donkey. I'm carrying on a conversation with a donkey. If I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you now. Is what he tells his donkey. That's being angry. This is what, to me, is going on with Pharaoh. He's so angry at what happened that he's not thinking logically. When we let anger... have you ever done anything out of anger and when you finished, it's like... your car doesn't crank. your car won't crank. You get out and kick the door. Now you got a car that won't crank with a dent in your door. You helped solve that, right? You made things better. That's what we do sometimes. We human beings are not as smart as we think we are. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand, and he goes through this entire, it says, not even one of them survived, but the Israelites had walked through the sea on dry land. They walked through the sea on dry land. The Egyptians were drowned. The Israelites were on this side. So we know the rest of the book of Exodus and the rest of their trip, they're going to behave themselves and going to do what they're supposed to, and they're going to listen. Right? Questions or comments?